and welcome back to Doz's Television Workshop. Today we're going to be talking about the Brick of Death. Yes, the Commodore 64 power supply. Now you remember in last week's episode when I did the C64C, that power supply I thought had blown its fuse, and I did say in the video that it hadn't. Because of the way that computer failed, it actually burnt the transformer out. That transformer was scrap. And I was going to use it as basis for this video. So I've got another one. There it is. It is, I think, a fairly late model power supply. We've got a date on there, 1290. Might be 12th week of 1990. Who knows? But there it is. And we're going to talk about what fails. Now, what fails is the 5 volts DC supply. And what tends to happen is that voltage rises above 5.5, and as it gets higher and higher, does more and more damage to your 64. So previously, when we did the bread bin, you'll remember we built a replacement power supply, and that shouldn't give us any trouble for many years. This, on the other hand, well, it's a bit of a liability, but I'm loath to scrap it. And I keep seeing advertised on eBay C64 Savers. The problem is they're like about 2/3 of the money of a new power supply, so I think I'd rather be doing that really. So Commodore 64 power supply, if we look on the back, it should tell us what it produces. There we go, 5 volts, and this one's 1.7 amps. Normally they're about 1.5. 9 volts at 1 amp. There it is, made in China. Good Lord. There we go, was a late one. So yeah, there it is. Unfortunately, most of these brick ones, I've never seen a brick one that isn't fully potted. Most of them are potted, and you just can't do anything about repairing them. Now, from what I've gleaned, what the C64 Saver does is monitor that 5 volt. You plug it in line with your power supply and your 64. So you power supply into the Saver into the 64. And what it does is it monitors that 5 volt power supply, and in the event of it going too high, cuts the power off. Well, that's all well and good, but you're still risking, you know, running your C64 on a junk power supply. And 2, it doesn't solve the problem. And I sort of got to thinking that maybe I could solve the problem. And yeah, so let's just test this one and see what it's doing. So we'll just give it some mains. Where's the blob of blue tack so you can see what I'm trying to achieve here. Right, there we go. Okay, sort of stuck in. We shall pop, this is just a 7-pin, it's an ordinary 7-pin socket, so that'll fit our power supply perfectly. Now we've got 2 voltages, as I mentioned. Across the top 2 pins, that's the pin nearest the sort of indent in the plug, we should have 9 volts AC. Is that meter in shot? It is. So don't forget, this isn't powering anything, so that voltage is probably going to rise maybe 10, maybe 10.5 volts, and that's fine. I'm not concerned about that level. So let's just get in on there, probe those 2 pins, and we've got 9.6 volts. Absolutely fine. Move to DC, and across the bottom 2 pins down here we should have 5 volts. Yeah, any much more than that and we're starting to run into trouble. Anything more than 5.5, which is actually the maximum rated voltages for the chips in the C64, we are in definite trouble. And the regulator is packing up in here. So because this power supply is regulated, we should see 5 volts regardless of load, really. So I'm just going to pop her on there. And this is going to read negative because that centre pin is actually negative. So we've got 5.23 volts. That's okay, I can live with that. But what happens, as the regulator fails, that voltage creeps up and up and up. So why don't we make a box that has a buck converter in it. Now the way a buck converter works, you set the buck converter is normally a step down regulator. So it takes, say, 9 volts, turns it into 5 volts and then outputs it. But the thing about a buck regulator is, even the sort of cheap modules we get on eBay, if the input voltage is lower than the set voltage for the buck converter, so say we set our buck converter for 5.1 volts. If there is 5.0 volts coming in, the output will be 5.0 volts. The buck converter will be nothing but just passing it. And as that voltage creeps up, then it will be regulating its way down. Not like a linear regulator where we actually need some headroom, so we need on a 5 volt regulator, maybe 1.5, maybe 2 volts, maybe 3 volts higher than the input to actually work. But the way a buck converter works, we can get away with just putting that in line, setting it for 5 volts, and then in the event of that voltage coming up, it'll steady it at 5 volts. The problem is, of course, this power supply is still failing. But we can't get in there to fix it. It's scrap. I hate throwing things in landfill, and I wish I'd thought about this when I did the wedge power supply for the other 64, but we built another one. Yeah, let's get a look and see if this sort of idea is going to work. Okay, got a little experiment on the bench. I was initially hoping to use one of these. Now this is eBay, AliExpress, any of the usual suspects. It's an LM2596 DC-DC converter, HW411. It's a great little buck converter. However, when the input voltage is sort of at our 5 volts, and I've set the output for 5 volts, and the buck converter is therefore not bucking, it's just passing, I think the resistance of the inductor is just a little bit high, and it sort of drops the output to about 4.5 volts when I'm drawing an amp. That's just marginal. So I don't think that's going to be any use to us. However, I've also got these, which I believe is the same chip. Let me just look at that. One moment. Oh no, this is an XL6009E1. Well, this is a CPIC converter. You can tell because it's got the 2 inductors as well as the chip. And what this will do, it's a buck or a boost. And what it does is, no matter what the input voltage is doing, it's either bucking, in other words, lowering the voltage. So if we've got 10 volts on our input, we've got 5 volts on our output. Or boosting, so if we've got 3 volts on our input, we'll have 5 volts on our output. Very useful. So I've got one of these on test on the bench. The load, you can just see on camera there with its fan. That's drawing an amp. Yes, an amp. And you can see we've got our Commodore 64 power supply is being perfectly well behaved at the moment with exactly 5 volts. And well, it's near as damn it 5 volts coming out. So what happens as our brick of death tries to kill our 64? Watch this voltage, watch that voltage. So by this stage, 6.29 volts, our Commodore 64 is getting hot under the collar if it's not already failed. And there you go, output voltage is remaining steady. So all we actually need to do is put one of those in line with our 64's power supply, and yeah, surely that's the answer. That way, if the power supply does fail, you know, it'll never produce more than our 5 volts. One thing, you do need to set these up obviously before you do that. What I do is give it about 12 volts on the input, and then just take a screwdriver and just set that up for as near as 5 volts as you can get. There we go. So there it should stay fairly well regulated all the way down to our 5 volts. Perfect. So I think that's the answer, isn't it? So let's get and 3D print a little enclosure, mount a socket on one end that'll plug our power supply into our brick of death, and then wire a 7-pin socket on the output just to pass that through. The 9 volts AC doesn't ever give a problem. Yeah, it doesn't go high, it can't go high or low. It's a transformer at the end of the day, so that's irrelevant. Let's make it so. Right, well, 3D printer's worked its magic, and yeah, we've got a bit of support structure just to get rid of here, so let's just see if we can do that. Break a bit of that away. Even the support structure had support structure by the look of it. Right, there we go. Get all that out of there. Excellent. So that's going to fit in like that. Now, you'll see in the lid here, I have put a little hole. And the idea was, I'm not quite sure I'm convinced I'm going to do this. It's either going to be a power LED, or I also thought about connecting an LED between the input and the output. So when the input rises up, it tries to switch the LED on to give us a sort of error indicator. Now, the only issue I've got with that is obviously the switch on voltage of the LED. Even if I use a red one, it's going to be quite substantial. But yeah, we'll do that. There's another electronic modification I need to make to this board. These go into a condition where they oscillate when the output is very low. And the oscillation can create a bit more of a voltage on the output than we'd like, because it loses regulation. So just to prevent against that, we're going to put a diode. Let me do that now. Let's get a diode. We don't want anything fancy in there. Just the 1N4007 will probably do us nicely. To which I think I've got loads of. Get my big drawer diodes out, because we're going to want a red LED as well. We'll try and see if that works. So there we go, an ordinary 1N4007 can go there, and a red LED indicating impending doom. So yeah, I'm going to current limit the LED at about 330 ohms. I think that needs to get made a bit larger, that hole. I should use the AliExpress torture tool. Trouble is, this lid's quite thick, and obviously with that we're just going to end up with a, because it's cone shaped, it's going to make the hole tapered, which is not quite ideal. The other thing is, I ought to 3D print a new cap for that. It used to have a cap on the end that was like smoothed over. As it is at the moment, it tries to drill a hole in your hand even with the blunt end. Right, there's our red LED in. That's super. So okay, so let's do that diode next. And I think it's probably long enough just to solder to the underside of the PCB. And yeah, so we want to go from out to in. So the stripe is pointing in the opposite direction of that thing there. We're going to need a bit of heat shrink or insulation or something. Let's get Get the old Satomatics box out. Just get a bit of that thin stuff there, that'll do us. If I form that, we'll use some pliers. Right, that solves that possible oscillation problem. So yeah, I'm just going to leave those wires hanging out for a moment, they might be useful in a minute. Okay, what did I say, 330 ohms, didn't I? Right. 330 ohms. Right, I'm going to put that on the long leg. So the long leg of our diode needs to go to the input positive rail, and the output needs to go to the output positive rail. So I'm just going to make these a little shorter. I'm going to put my resistor in there. We'll snap that resistor there. A couple of little bits of wire. What we got? What we got? Super. Right, so that's our socket completed. That's going to look quite good in there. So we've modified our board. So we've now got to get, we need some 4-core, just a short length. I'm going to put this sort of next to the 64. So I need a short length of 4-core cable just to go on there and go into there. So bear with me a second, because I think I've got some multi-core stuff in the garage.
A few moments later.
Wasn't in the garage after all, it was in my little bits box. This is some 4-core Teflon stuff, and the nice bit about it is that end was already very nicely prepared. So I've only got to do this end, and this end's going to be the bit that goes into the plug. Now, if you're a child of the 70s and you had a cassette deck with a 5-pin DIN on it, you'll know what utter junk these connectors are. The trick is, when soldering them, is to be very, very quick. Very quick indeed. They sort of come in this clamshell arrangement. We'll worry about that afterwards. But there we are. That's our 7 pins there. We will need to fit that, obviously, though I suspect it'll go over that end anyway. Will it? Let's just check. So I don't have to have it on there when I'm soldering it. I won't. Good. I don't have to. Excellent. Right. I'm just going to prepare this. This cable's also screened, but we can do away with the screen. It's weird, this stuff. It's like a spiral wound Teflon tape. I suspect it was extremely expensive. I cadged 3 or 4 meters out of a skip at a place where I worked years ago. So looked like it had come in handy. Can never resist looking at a skip. Drives the long and suffering Mrs. Dawes mad. Right, that's coming away now. A little bit more, I think. There we are. Ah, it's only 3 core. And it's sort of mains colours, look. Got, well, if you're in the UK or Europe, it's brown, green and blue. That one black wire there, that must be the screen. That's all right, we'll use the screen. That means I've just got to pick it apart and turn it into something sensible. So let's just do that. Just strip a few threads out of that. It's too thick as it stands. A few more maybe. Right, let's find a suitable bit of heat shrink to go around there. It's only the end piece I need worry about, really. So I'm just going to slide that up there. Right, so that's going to be our ground. I think we'll have brown for +5 and then green and yellow for AC. Why not? So on the plug side of life, it goes in that way up. It is the bottom right. So looking at that, so we have got pin 1. They always number these things funny. I'll just take you through that. Look, let's have a zoom in. Move that back so you can see it. And some focus would be nice, wouldn't it? Whoa, there we go. So that there is pin 1. That is 2. That is 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Madness, isn't it? Why not just start at one end and run round like a normal connector? No. So pin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Madness. We do know the top ones, which are, of course, 6 and 7. Those are our AC. So we can just put that together. Come on, tin up, you swine, that'll do. And of course, because it's backwards to our socket, because we're looking at it from the other side, our +5 volts is on pin 5. How convenient. 5 for 5. And our DC ground is on pin 2. There we go. I'm going to get that ground in first, I think, because it's... no, let's leave the ground till last. Just want to take a little bit of that solder off there. Let's go to the expense of just a shade of braid. That's better. Right. So yeah, let's put our AC on first. I said that was going to be green and blue. It's okay. 5 is 5. Oh, it all starts to get a bit tight. Didn't quite go down into the bucket. Here we go. And ground, I am just going to pop a bit of sleeving on that because I don't want it coming into contact with the 5 volts and wreaking havoc. I haven't got any pins at a funny angle, so I think we're going to pass that off as a success. As I said, the pins on these they used to get horribly sort of melty. Right, let's just warm that heat shrink up. There we go. And reassemble the plug, complete with strain relief, which we can crimp round. That's it. The whole thing is held together with the nasty plastic sleeve, so let's get that in. They really are rubbish. As a connector, once it's assembled, it's pretty good, but they're just not a nice thing. That's the problem there. We've crimped it up too tight, it's moved the whole connector at an angle. Let me just uncrimp it. Put the thing together and then crimp it up afterwards, I think is probably the answer. That's better. Everything's a little straighter in there now. Which way round? That way round. Oops. And that latch there just stops it coming apart. That's another bit done. Time for a cup of tea.
5 minutes later.
Right, nice cup of tea. I'm just going to tack a couple of wires onto our LED here. That's good. Put a bit of heat shrink around it. A nice orange bit. Actually, if I got one bigger, I could go down the whole of that resistor as well, which is probably a good thing. Drop that. That should be good, I think. So a little bit on there. Same again for the other one. Oops. Put the wrong bit away. That's it. Obviously these wires are massively too long at the moment. Excellent. Now I'm actually going to go and actually bend this over here because otherwise we're never going to have enough clearance for all that in the box. Right, onto the box. We've now got the tedious task of marrying all the bits up together. So just strip a little off here. Tin those up. It'll be far too long, isn't it? But we'll have enough room to sort of wind it up in the box, I think. So our inputs on this side. I'm going to cut this while I'm here. In fact, we'll strip it and tin it as well. For our AC. Where are my strippers? There they are. There's a lot of luck here, am I? What's going on? Okay. So red and on black go to in. Let's flood this with solder a bit. And the outs while we're at it. Ah, you can't see that, I'm off camera. There we go. Just flood in these pads, look. Super. So we need to connect ground to in. Red to there. In positive. I think I'm going to tack that on last. Right, so that's going to sort of live in there, that will fold in hopefully. What have we got on our output side? So I I can't remember what colours I chose now. That's ridiculous. Brown was 5, wasn't it? It's flooding back. There's the connections for our AC. I'm hoping I've got enough lead length here not to have to deal with any unpleasant treads. Right, get that through the hole. I think I'll just get away with this. Oh, just. I'll just tack it on the edge of there, look. It's tight, but hey. Yeah, well, tight's okay. LED. Just to sort of aid simplicity, I think I might just tack this on the bottom. We want positive side of the LED to in plus, and the negative side to out plus. Shorten that a bit, I think. There we go, and that will give us a warning that the power supply has in fact failed. And it will be a pretty dramatic fail at that point, because we're going to have enough voltage difference to light an LED, which is going to be substantial, I think. Okay. We still need to join our AC up together. I'm just wondering if that might be easier underneath now. Dunno. I'll have to get a bit of heat shrink sleeving on it anyway. Let's just pull it all out. There we are. That'll make life a bit easier. Oh, right. We're going to want more heat shrink sleevage going on here. That's not going anywhere. Excellent. Pull it all through into the enclosure. And I'm going to have the fun job of snapping the lid on, which isn't going to be particularly easy to do, because I made those tolerances quite tight. Because I've made all the tolerances quite tight. Come on, go in. You know you want it. There we go. Just get that down in there. Snap the lid on. Oh yes. Oh, nearly. I was going to put a couple of little self-tappers in there, which I think I've run out of. Oh, no, there's one or two. There are two. They're not actually self-tappers, are they? You need to make a little hole. Look the other way. I'm going to use my plastic abuse bit. one. Let's actually put the screw in. We can align the other one up correctly. Right, there we have it, a C64 Saver that will actually allow us to continue on using a broken power supply. Does it work? That was interesting. Did you see that light blink on the instant I connected that? Let's just try that again. Yeah, just blinks. I suppose it would do, because that voltage does take a split second to collapse. I need a 64 to test it on. Right, let's go and get a 64. There you go, the C64 working perfectly with its C64 Saver in line. That's going to stop that brick of doom destroying our machine. You'll notice it's on our little black and white TV. By the time you're watching this video, it was probably a couple of videos back if you want to see us doing that one. These videos get made in all manner of orders. I've normally got sort of like 3 or 4 on the boil at once, and in fact the C64C video and the C64 Saver video were made back in the summer. So yeah, except for that was the time I also had a bit of a flaky hard disk, so you'll notice those previous scenes in this video we're lacking the usual camera angles, and a bit of a shame, but the footage went missing. Yeah, never mind. Click like, subscribe, do all that rubbish. If you fancy buying me a coffee, there's a link below, and I'll see you really soon here on Doz's Television Workshop. Cheers now, bye.